The fourth Sunday of Easter is always Good Shepherd Sunday. We tell the story of the Good Shepherd because it's a perfect example of what Easter is, characterized into what is a Good Shepherd. And as I was thinking about my journey with the Good Shepherd and my journey in this life to attempt to follow the Good Shepherd, I saw this video on social media and I had to share it with you to kind of characterize how I feel my attempt of following the Good Shepherd has been. And maybe you might relate to your experience too. So here it is. I don't know if you caught that, but as soon as this poor sheep is wedged out of the hole, he takes a bounding leap into what he thinks or she thinks is freedom, which is really truly just another hole down the pathway. Particularly this year, when it's been marked by pandemic, injustice, and anxiety, when those things tend to reign, or it feels like they are reigning, we as a community, just as that poor sheep, are wedged out of the hole, that hole of pandemic, that hole of racism or injustice in our community, or even an anxiety cycle, just like the sheep. And we take a big leap into the air, which we think is freedom, and we find ourselves in a completely different hole down the path. This year, the story of the Good Shepherd comes for us from the Gospel of John. And as you think about that video and you think about today's gospel, it makes me wonder, why is it that we keep finding ourselves into this hole? And I think the Gospel of John might have some keys that would help us figure out, maybe to see the difference between freedom, true freedom, and the freedom that is presented as freedom, but is not true. In the Gospel of John, it's important for you to know that this is a counterexample of what a true spiritual leader is after what happened right before the Good Shepherd story. What happened right before was a blind man, was a story about a blind man, born blind at birth, stuck on the outside, begging for food and money to survive because the spiritual leaders had already condemned him to what they believed was a life of punishment, of sin. Maybe it was his sin, maybe it was his parents' sin. None of it was quite clear. But when Jesus healed the man, the concerned leaders, the spiritual leaders, did nothing but condemn the fact that Jesus had done it on a Sabbath. And so the Good Shepherd is meant to be a story as an example of what is a good shepherd versus a hired hand. And so if you think of it, it's really important in the Gospel of John to separate these two differences between the hired hand, the thieves, and the bandits. What is the leadership qualities of someone from God versus someone who may not be from God? That's really important for us now because it feels though we live in a world that has very few leaders that follow that concept of the Good Shepherd, being willing to actually give one's life for the community. And even if we were presented with a leader who was willing to give one's life for the community, I don't know about you, but I might be skeptical. What do they get out of it? And I think that's because we are completely inundated by hired hands in our world. David Lose, one of my favorite preachers who writes a blog for preachers, gave 3 examples of really important hired hands that I'd like to share with you today. Now, hired hands, as it turns out, isn't really out to kill the sheep. Really, they're there to help, and they may even be motivated to help. But the truth is, when push comes to shove, when the wolf comes, they're going to run for their lives and let the sheep just be whatever happens. They're in it for the cash, right? Their reward is really little regard for the flock. They see themselves as important enough that they need to be spared from whatever might come. And so really, the important thing is themselves. And so the three examples he gave first was marketing. Now, this is an important part of how we share stories. Like another word or another phrase for marketing can be sharing stories and sharing information. But lately, marketing seems less about the story and more about mindless, endless consumption. And if you drill down into the story that's told in our marketing in our world today over and over and over again, is a sense of inadequacy. Using retail to address real human needs, which we all know can never really truly fill. The second example of a hired hand is social media. Now, I know it's ironic that I'm talking about social media as a hired hand as we live stream on Facebook and YouTube. And it does play an important role in our community and in our society, especially now, because staying connected is the purpose of it, right? It is the importance of it. It is what we can get out of it. But at the end of the day, no matter what platform, their hope is not altruism or that connection. It's really monetary, right? And that they actually have sophisticated algorithms to create content to keep you looking at the screen. In addition to that, they motivate us by how many likes or how many followers we have, which has really led to a culture of self-absorption and insecurity and a culture of outrageous. The more outrageous, the better it is. And the third example he gave are hyper-partisan and polarized politics. Now, politics, the Greek polis meaning coming of the people, isn't more, now it feels though it is more about defined on who we are against rather than who we are for. These three examples, politics, defining yourself and what we are against, marketing, using the stories of not being adequate enough in order to get us to buy more, and social media, the sense of value being connected to likes, has led to scarcity, insecurity, and fear. Oh, I forgot politics, right? This defining of who we are not has led to fear. And so it feels as though our world has megaphones, even algorithms of these hired hands that lead us into another hole. And today's story reminds us that it's so easy to fall prey to it, like the sheep in the video, to leap into what is freedom only to find ourselves in another hole. Michael Curry put it simply, if it isn't about love, it isn't of God. And that we must know for ourselves, that if any of these things that we see in this world, if it isn't about love as its primary motivation, its center, its core, it isn't of God, and to be weary of it, to know that God's message should transcend it. The story of the Good Shepherd is really a story about a sheep who are being called into one flock, one way of being, of love. The story of the Good Shepherd tells us you are enough. You are loved. You are not just enough, you're more than enough. That there is so much love given to you and in you that it calls out to be shared. Not just shared, but to share it abundantly. True freedom is found in that abundant love and gift that God has given us. And so I pray for you today, this fourth Sunday, to recognize the true story, the true love, the Good Shepherd in our world, and to recognize the hired hands. You are enough. You are loved. Share that love abundantly, and in that you will find true freedom. May we leap into the air and find that stable ground of God underneath us. Amen.